Welcome back to another pen talk. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for following me on my journey, which seems to have no end, which is good for me. So you may ask, where do I get my new pen ideas from? Well, I've discussed searches on eBay. I've not been doing the random searches as much as I used to, so maybe I might be missing out on things. Viewer suggestions. And also just other little places on the web, Instagram, Twitter. Yeah, I follow a few people that seem to be quite good at finding interesting pens, also other YouTube reviewers. And also I've discussed Scrivener. So this one, I read the review on Scrivener and I said, interesting pen. Let me buy one. So I went on eBay. Here's the auction. Bobby was selling it, so that was good from my perspective. This is your generic box, which we've seen quite a bit. 618 came in these boxes. If we open it up, we'll see the pen. We'll also see an interesting thing is a spare nib with the whole assembly. So that was nice. So I chose this color. I wanted a somewhat muted color. It comes in both wood and resin. This is resin over metal. This has a pretty hefty weight to it. And the first impression you get is this is just a quality pen. It has that feel about it. The engraving is nice and clean on the cap band. You have a nice significant cap band there. And of course it is a Wingsung 627. The cap finial is done nicely. The plating is very consistent and very nice. The same motif that's on the top of the cap is on the bottom of the barrel. So it's an interesting way of consistent design. A classic design clip. Very functional, very stiff. It unscrews about 1.5 turns, and we'll see a nice number 6 nib, or the approximate of a number 6. It's not exactly. So this is pretty much a unique size that Wingsung has been using. It was in the 626 model, which was the Schaefer balance imitation. You got a metal section here, which is not necessarily my favorite, but it does weight the pen properly towards the nib, which is good. And it is a little slippery. It's not like a resin or an ebonite section would feel. You don't feel those threads, and there's really no transition, no step up, so you can hold this pen anywhere that you want. It fits okay in the hand. And there's a lot of weight in the cap. We'll give you the weights between the pen and the cap. It does post fairly deeply and fairly securely. You do feel that weight, that added weight from the cap, and it is a little back weighted, but it actually kind of balances the pen from being nib heavy to being a little bit more neutral, more closer to the crooks of your hand. So the resin is nice, a subtle design. Doesn't have a lot of depth to it like you would in a turned acrylic or acetate, which seems to be showing up on a fair number of Chinese pens. So overall, your first impressions of this is it's a quality pen. It's certainly a little bit different than we're used to seeing. But then, of course, the price is north of $20, so the price is a little bit more. It is nice that they give you another nib, and the other nib they give you was medium. It came with a fine, but me, I've swapped already. I've cleaned all of these, so they're ready to be inked up when appropriate. It's a very clean design nib, stainless steel nib. You can see the F for fine there. I haven't been able to pull this out, but I haven't put a lot of effort into it. Since I have 2 nibs, let's see how these write before I start playing around. And because it's not a standard size nib, getting one to fit in there probably is not the easiest thing to do. We have some sunlight out, so we know how sunlight is one of the great sources of light to use when looking at pens like this with resins with some depth to it. This is an interesting resin, a clean design. I've got a lot. There were a lot of different colors. We'll show you some of those that are available. It also came in wood as well as resin. And I chose this resin pen because I try to get something a little bit different than I have in other pens, and I'm quite happy with the way this one looks. We'll show it to you in this nice sunlight. This whole section here is metal, is like we expected from the weight. We have an upgraded wing-sung converter. Kind of has that platinum look to it. You know, I had to unscrew this and free up the piston. It was a little bit stuck when I got it. It just pulls off, but you'll notice a nice metal ring here at the bottom, and it appears to be like a nice silicone insert. So this is an excellent design with a long life to it and a good solid seal. One of the things that's interesting, if we look inside the cap, we'll see a nice cap liner in there. Looks like some type of square screw type of thing at the end to hold that clip assembly in place. And if we look at the barrel, we'll see that there's a plastic piece there, so it's plastic threads on metal threads. But as you go down the barrel, you'll see that there's that metal, nickel brass, that the barrel is made out of. And it appears that it could be also lined with something in there, so potentially you could eyedropper it, but I wouldn't play around with it or trust it to do that. I think it's really nice that they've given you this simple plastic cover for your spare nib. Another pen manufacturer which sells a pen that's quite a bit more expensive and also gives you another section to use for different nibs doesn't provide you with a similar type of device to protect the nib when it's not in the pen. Here's the instructions which were included inside the pen box. A little bit heavier paper than usual, and so it retains its crinkled up condition. But it's interesting that it shows you all the parts and gives you a full description of the manufacturer. The Wing-Sung is pretty good at providing very good instructions, showing you how to fill the pen, showing you how to clean the pen, and then some other information down here will show you some translations. And we're going to show you how I flush. Got this bulb syringe. Fits well on the back of the section. Squeeze out some air. Let the bulb pull up some water. See how fast it pulls up water? It's good enough water. And the other key thing is how the water comes out. So that's a pretty good stream. So I'm expecting this to be a wet writer. We'll see how this is a good predictor of that. I've decided to use Yamadori. Haven't used this in a pen recently. So I've had this pen ink for a while. I actually have 2 bottles of it. So let's fill up this pen and see how that medium nib works. I've got a pretty good fill. I did my 3 ups and downs. The biggest challenge is those sailor bottles are just a pain in the butt to try to get ink out of. I need that Penita insert that lets you kind of use this as a syringe, or I could have just filled it with a syringe, but I tried to get it out of the bottle. Thought it'd be good to take a close-up look at these 2 nibs. The fine one is the one to the right. The medium one is to the left. There's definitely more tipping material on the medium one, and it's definitely wider. And I certainly do enjoy the way both of these nibs write, but the medium is my preference. So if we're ready to put nib to paper, to mention, you know, this is a well-designed, well-engineered pen, and it's actually a little bit over 2 turns to get the cap off. I didn't pay attention last time. You know, I think this is reminiscent of some of the high-end Italian pens in certain aspects. You know, the metal section is more common in some of their pens than it is in other pens. You know, the heft and weight of the pen is certainly puts it in a little bit of a different class. When you give this to somebody you write with, I'm certain they'll feel it's a well-made, high-quality pen. But again, what really matters is how does the nib work on paper. I'm deciding, you know, I would say I would write with this unposted. It's just a preference for me. Overall, I'm quite happy with this nib. It certainly lays down a nice patch of ink. Interesting, I haven't used Yamadori for a while. It's more in the blue family than the blue teal family, but it's a nice ink. It has good flow to it. Without any pressure, just lays down a fairly thin line. It actually writes okay in reverse, even though that's not something I normally do. But for those that want a really fine line you can barely read, you could do that with this. But if you put a little bit of pressure on it, it lays down a lot more ink. So this is one of those nibs that responds to pressure. I wouldn't call it soft, but I wouldn't call it super stiff either. It's kind of a nice in-between. Yeah, I'd say it definitely has a little bit of spring to it, but it's not something that I would promote or take advantage of. Wouldn't put a lot of pressure on it. You get a lot of ink flow, but you're not going to get much line variation. So now we have to rate this pen. I'm going to go for an 8.9. It's probably a little bit on the low side, but you know, from my viewpoint, it's definitely a nice pen, but it doesn't break any grounds. It looks good. It's well made. It feels okay in the hand. This is a section I could do without, and we'll give you the dimensions of the section. You know, it's on the short side, so, but you can hold it anywhere if that's what you like. And the number 6 nib is good, but and those of you that follow my channel, I don't really care what size the nib is as long as it writes well, and that's the most important part. And I think I would enjoy writing with this pen. I have some holiday letters and New Year's letters to get out, so this will be one of the pens that I will use in writing those letters. So I think we need to look at the fine nib and then close it up. I've swapped the nibs and saturated the feed and let the nib do its thing. So this is the fine nib. It is definitely finer. You get a little bit more feedback. But when you put pressure on it, it'll get pretty close to the medium nib. And it's a decent amount of pressure. You know, this also lays down a fairly nice wet patch of ink, like the medium nib did. You know, not quite as much ink, but certainly a decent amount. So EDC on Scrivener, like the fine nib, I think I'll stick to the medium nib. But for those that like to be able to have different, you know, choices with the same pen for the same money, then this certainly might fit the bill. Like I said, it's a quality feel. It's a well-made pen. I did notice slight variations, like I had to do a little bit of work on the converter, but you know, who knows how long this has been sitting around, and it was an easy fix. The converter's easy to take apart, and I also had to clean up some excess resin that was around this cap. Not a little bit, I just used my thumbnail. But you know, that was the only things that I found, and you know, for the price that you pay for this pen, it's not going to be perfect. You can pay a lot more and the pen still isn't perfect. So that's no deciding factor on how perfect a pen is. It's just like when you don't pay a lot of money for a pen, then you kind of accept the little nuances and little things that it might have. So hopefully you've enjoyed this view of an interesting pen that I would not have probably looked at if it wasn't for reading the review by EDC. So thank you for watching. May you have many great writing experiences. This is a phenomenal world that we should be grateful for having an opportunity to partake in, and hopefully this is another bit of information that might help you decide on what pen, if you are in the mood to buy one, or just enjoy what you're seeing from the pen that I'm showing you. So we've reached the end of this video. The new year is coming up. I don't know when I'll post this, but it could be 2018 or 2019, but whatever it is, I wish you the best in the upcoming year and hope that it meets your expectations. So until the next video, bye for now. This nib is very consistent. It's a good clean writer, and Sailor Ink works well with it. It's a wet one.